research on robotics. In recent weeks, robots have been used to disinfect areas and deliver food to those in quarantine. Drones have helped in vigilance as well as delivery. And going forward, drones could soon be deployed for delivering COVID-19 vaccines in the remote and the hard to reach geographies of the country. To discuss more about the same, I would love to invite Ms. Payal Rajpal, founder, Robotex India. Mr. Ankit Mehta, co-founder and CEO, Idea Forge. Mr. Kanav Kumar, business head and director, Better Drones. And Mr. Smith Shah, director, Drone Federation of India. To lead the session, I would like to invite Mr. Nikhil Malhotra, Chief Innovation Officer, Tech Mahindra. To know more about the speakers, you can download the show catalog from the upper tab on the right-hand side of the screen called the Handout Back. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're ready, over to you, Mr. Malhotra.
Thank you so much, Sneha, and I think it's been wonderful to have this eclectic panel on with me to discuss. We'll keep the conversations light and dandy, but as you rightly mentioned, the pandemic of COVID-19 has been kind of a cheap digital officer for all of us. It has made data scientists like me into virologists and virologists into data scientists. But I think one more thing that COVID-19 has done for all of us is it's actually made the combination or the melding of humans as well as machines better. While we keep talking about the IQs and EQs, I have this panel to discuss what's going to be the future of those machines and human beings working together. So what we do is, as I said, keep the conversation very light and dandy. I'll ask a speaker to give their kind of a perspective of what we're doing, and we'll of course start with Payal. Payal Rajpal is the founder of Robotex India, and she's a futurist, an educationist, and an entrepreneur. She's an IT graduate from India with a distinct vision for the future, and she's had a journey from LSE to founding HackerCause and heading South Asia Robotech. She's also a pioneer in bringing robotics, AI, ML, and STEAM education to government schools in urban, tribal, and rural areas. Payal, over to you for your perspective.
Thank you, Nikhil. And while we were having a little backstage chat, all of us, the first thing I said is that, I'm the earth sticking out here, all the technology stalwarts. So I'm going to speak from more of an education perspective. Like we all know that robotics and drones feature in the top trends, not only for World Economic Forum, but jobs of tomorrow, when we talk about jobs of the future 2030. And the pandemic made it sort of doubly sure that this can help us build a resilient society. Robotics drone also feature in the top 10 technical skills to be learned in the coming decade. So while we look at considerations about how they affect on how we do business, how we trade, how we work, how we produce goods, how we study, how we upskill, how we seek medical services, and how we entertain ourselves, predominantly in a post-pandemic normal. Simplifying it, robots have been used to disinfect areas and to deliver food to those in quarantine, and we had these as winning solutions at the Global Hack, which was conducted in April 2020, being one of the first largest digital hackathon that we ran. Drones have walked dogs and delivered items, and again we had a 7.5-year-old child that during the lockdown, without all the facilities or the hardware available, created a drone from his pod with the tins and the bottles that he had at home. Therefore, we at Robotics India found it imperative to have these future skills extended to the no-strata marginalized community. And happy to say that in the last 2 years, we've educated 20,000 children from government schools on robotics, and drone is something that we will build into our curriculum this year. So happy to be here, and over to you, Nikhil.
No, happy to have you, Payal. That's a great perspective. I think education seems to be on the forefront in terms of what we can do with robotics, as well as the connected world of deep tech, which may include AI, which may include ML, and so on and so forth. My next speaker is Mr. Ankit Mehta. He's the co-founder and CEO of Idea Forge, a next-generation drone system company that manufactures advanced unmanned aerial vehicles for defense, homeland security, and industrial applications. Ankit, of course, graduated from IIT Mumbai, but I would love to have Ankit's perspective on this particular topic and how we take news.
Thanks, Nikhil. I'd like to sort of go back to where the drone industry particularly was before the pandemic. It was 7 years since India introduced a ban on drones, particularly for private use. And then on in 2018, we also banned use we did not ban actually, we enabled use, but we never had the systems to actually operationalize in 2018. And then very strongly COVID hit us, right? And suddenly everyone realized that we need to go uncrewed or we will be completely screwed. So everyone wanted to use drones, and you had to do that because there was no clear information whether just by being in a location in an area whether I'll catch COVID or not. Even the forces who were enforcing lockdowns were actually afraid that if I go in I'll catch COVID. But at the same time, because large areas were under quarantine, you had to know what is happening inside. You wanted to understand whether there is excessive movement, whether it's going to be effective at all or not. Not just that, deliveries became a problem. The whole sanitization, confusion, let me call it, sort of made people feel like, there needs to be something that will help us sanitize those, public areas where people are walking. So, there was so much information, misinformation. But one common thread was that if we don't have drones, we might end up, putting too many people at risk. And therefore, you will see that even the government came up with an exemption for usage of drones for any COVID pandemic related activity, right? That was the first time actually after 2018 where exemption was given for anything related to drones. Then also you saw that the government of India came up with a scheme called the Swamitwa scheme, where they want to map all the 660,000 villages of the country using drones to provide property cards to the rural landholders. And that's the first time that they will become a part of the economic mainstream and have it that they can collateralize if required for their working capital or other needs. So that was again an area where drones started to emerge last year from a good to have technology suddenly to a must have technology. And then we had challenges at our northern border where we realized that we had no eyes on the border. We actually didn't know what was happening before it happened, and then we were just left managing the situation, and we are still grappling with the effects of that lack of information, let me put it that way, right? And then, of course, the final nail in the coffin in that one sense was the war that happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan, where Azerbaijan won over Armenia purely because of the strength of their drones. And that told the world that if we don't want to be the next Armenia and have to lay down arms so quickly for the first time after 1971, then we better invest in drones. We make sure that we have enough capacity, capability to counter any threat to our sovereignty, even from drones, right? So that happened, and then very interestingly, a few weeks back, we had attacks from drones, which were going to cause us to now look at even counter drones. So today, if you look at drones as an industry, it's not just drones; it's drones and counter drones that have gained a lot of steam. And following that, while all of this was happening and the entire country was moving towards operationalizing drones, and we were getting exemptions for low-cost operations and whatnot, suddenly we have rules that came out in the early part of the year that made it impossible for basically anybody to operate legally in that one sense. So the government took note of that after it was highlighted to them that this is going completely against the grain of the year that we've spent trying to enable operations. We finally, last few weeks back, we see that now allows operations of drones in particularly areas which are far enough away from airports, up to a height where it is considered relatively safe to operate these systems, without going into complicated set of permissions and all of that. So I think we've come a long way, and it is the emerging or the emergent solution from the new normal, let me put it this way, that is going to see deep penetration into our daily life over the next few months and years, because now no longer is it good to have tech, it is a must have, and we need to use its advantage everywhere.
I think well said, Ankit, and I think warfare, and as we were discussing backstage, it reminds me of also how grey the warfare has become. It's no longer black and white, and I think with these emergent techs, the warfare is also changing. For the listeners who come from actually from schools, colleges, and maybe some of the people who don't know, there's a different concept in warfare these days called swarms, which actually draws its inspiration from a swarm of birds or a school of fish, of how they attack together. But I think Ankit was referring to it. We may like to go into it as a question and answer session. But my next speaker is Kanav. Kanav is the business head and director of Better Drones. He's an enthusiastic entrepreneur with a passion for technically driven resources and the fundamentals of learning, which is very interesting. His vision, as he says, is in service is to create a platform to carry out smooth, safe, and efficient aerial data acquisition using different drones and sensors. Kanav, your comments.
So firstly, thank you, Nikhil. Thank you for the introduction. And my comment on this will be very clear, right? Pandemic helped us, even at Better Drone, to think over again and again over the vision which we are envisaging. Right? There are a lot of things which we are able to do while pandemic, and it helped the industry to change their perspective. Actually, as rightly said by Ankit, firstly, drones totally banned. We can't fly. We have lots of issues to take permission and all sort of things. Now, after this pandemic and after getting the new rules and all sort of things, we are become one of the most the drone industry become one of the required solution or a required need these days. So everyone or almost every department is eyeing towards drone for some of the solution. You name it road, you name it railways, you name it oil gas, you name it city planning or a local municipality. Somehow everyone is looking for some solution through drones. So that's a very good sign, and everyone knows about the latest latest happening for the PLI scheme and our rules and regulation. Everyone is talking about big numbers. Everyone is trying to jump into this industry to get their pie. So that's one of the biggest thing. And after that, after pandemic and all, our government is also able to understand that we have to go big on our infrastructure. And when we talk about infrastructure, drones play a major role from very basic survey to continuous monitoring of the audits and doing inspection and a lot of other things. So somehow, what my perspective is, and what I think that this industry will become a kind of boom, like we have to be during the internet era. Like we used to have the internet cafes at every corner. So there will be a drone company or a solo entrepreneur or a influencer in drone at every corner of the city. So there will be drone multiple thousand and million of drones flying over there. So that's my take. Thanks,
I very, very interesting thought, Kanav. I was actually thinking we should actually start having drone cafes as well, where you can park your drone and get it serviced as well in the air. So great thought. I'll come back to you on this. Finally, the man who makes the drones go and run and fly is Mr. Smith Shah, who's the director of Drone Federation of India. He works with leading drone manufacturers, service providers, public and private sector corporations for not just creating opportunities, but also accelerating their growth within the industry in India. He also plays a prominent role in drone policy advocacy by interacting with civil and defense government agencies. And we'd love to hear from Smith what his take is on this particular topic. Smith, we're not able to hear you. Possibly, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Please go ahead. Yeah.
So I would just want to talk from a different perspective. While Ankit rightly mentioned about how the drone ecosystem has evolved and various applications that have actually helped sensitize various stakeholders on how drones can be helpful. I also want to talk about how drones is the industry that will actually help promote, create IP, and take India from a services ecosystem to a manufacturing ecosystem, which is when you talk about conventional robotics or when you talk about mobiles or when you talk about laptops or computers, and the manufacturing of them, it's typically a business that requires hundreds of crores or probably thousands of crores to set up. But when we initially we were discussing with Payal as well in the backstage, there are people, students who can create drones with very low cost equipments, and they can be hobby sort of models, and it is robotics, and then the robot that flies that also brings in the aspiration and the inspiration. So this is probably our ticket for India to focus on IP creation and indigenous manufacturing, not just the Make in India aspect where we are saying we bring in foreign technology and then just do mass production of that in India, but also create the IP and start leading the effort in terms of becoming a manufacturing ecosystem. In fact, I would feel that it is so easy to start a drone business. Two people, let's say Nikhil, me and you, we like the conversation that happened today, and we decide to start a drone company. We don't really need 10 crores or 50 crores or 100 crores to start a drone manufacturing business. Services, yes, we'll be able to use the best drones of the world, and then a lot of data analytics software and all of that. But as opposed to being a software focused country that we are in various other ecosystems, this is probably the industry that will also actually kick us towards the manufacturing side, and talk about how can we build propellers in India, motors in India, the PCBs that are very low cost in this case, in India, and create the designs for the PCBs and the motors, all of it, and not just be mass manufacturing, right? So that's what I feel. Drone industry, while everyone talked about how it helped us put the robotics and the drone space in the center foot during the pandemic, and now it's well versed. No one really knows what drones can do. There's no one like that. It was all around the news and all. But from a different perspective, I think that is going to help inspire many, invest a lot of support to many small entrepreneurs, and this is our ticket to being a manufacturing ecosystem, not just for low cost goods, but also for very high end drone taxis, delivery drones, and all of that. So that's my initial take on things.
No, I think very well said. I think we keep talking about in today's era and world, saying we've got to have a good mix of physical and digital, and somebody has also coined the term called phygital in certain ways that we try and do within the IT world. But I think this industry is truly going to take it to that phygital phenomena that you're talking about, Spin. So I'll start with my next question. As I said, I'll keep it light and dandy. We'll look at it as to how we can look at technology, we can cover policies, we can actually look at how education needs to change. So my first question to any one of you, right, and you can take a crack at it, any one of you, is I want the viewers to understand what's the new policy. What is this about, and how would it really help? To be very, very simplistic to start off with.
Why don't you go, Smith?
Yeah, sure. So when we look at the new policy, just to take a step back and draw the comparison, for anyone to start a drone company in India and then make a compliant drone, there were about several permissions, more than 8 or 10 permissions and licenses required, even for a company to build their first drone and do research and development and testing flights. And then there were various technical concepts that were required. It's like building a digital lock on the drone. Imagine, Nikhil, if you are sitting at your house and you want to go to the office, and then you want to come back and then probably even go for grocery shopping and a meeting and all of that. For each trip from point A to point B, you required the government's permission. Until the government did not really give you a digital certificate, your car will not turn on. It just cannot start. There's a digital lock, and the only person who can unlock your drone, the car, in this case drone, would be the government. And this was wonderful thinking as a concept, but you require the digital infrastructure and the platforms and all of that in place, and various other digital databases and airspace maps that were to be made available, which is what was an attempt to say, let's do everything together on day zero, and let's sort of mandate everything. So that was the permission intensive and the technically pumped ecosystem that we had earlier. Whereas with the pandemic coming in, the Azerbaijan-Armenia war and various other things that Ankit mentioned, and especially a strict policy being there in place, and someone taking off from the other side of the border and dropping 2 bombs on an Indian Air Force Jammu Air Force Base, right? Was a clear understanding saying, however strict you can, regulate a sector, people who are going to use these tools and create some mischief around it are not going to actually come to the government. They are not really going to, sort of comply with the law. So cars are being used for car bombs, but it doesn't really mean that you ban all vehicles and you ban all cars because of the very rare possibility of them being used as carrier of bombs, right? The economic potential that transport vehicles bring in, whether it's transport of goods or transport of people, and the advantage that it brings to the economy far outweigh the 0.00001% risk probably that can be brought by the same transportation vehicle being used for transporting or fitting in explosives and using it as a a tool of disaster. So that is what was a clear sort of understanding, the build up from the pandemic and the Jammu Air Force Base incident, based on which the government said yes, the industry has been saying this since quite some time, and we really understand this very clearly now. And there was a total 180-degree shift. In fact, not just within this government, not just in the technology sector, but in any public policy since independent India has any regulation been repealed in such a short span of time. In March 2021, we had the drone rules, the unmanned aircraft system rules. That was the previous policy that came in, and in just 4 to 5 months of time, that policy was superseded by drone rules, which is the new policy. In fact, even the name is not unmanned aircraft now; it's drone, so that it can be appealing to the common public, and that's the sort of premise on which this policy has been brought in. And very clearly, this policy now takes drones away from aviation and brings it closer to automobiles. So any car that you drive on the road has to be certified once, and then you can build 1 crore cars, similar to that. So drones need certification. Any person who drives the car needs to be trained and needs to have a driving license. Here, some categories of drones require drone pilot license, except for the small recreational ones. All of them require a pilot license, and this is how safety is maintained. Next, both the drone and the pilot have to be registered on an online platform, which means they have submitted some national identity documents and they are a part of a national registry. And now, from a security and traceability perspective, they are a part of a national registry. So security is maintained. So this is the safety and security. Now, even despite of all of these efforts, probably there could be some mishap and there could be some drone crashing and some disaster happening. So just like the automobile sector, third-party liability insurance is compulsory for all drones except a small category of nano drone, which is usually toys or recreational drones. And once you have all of this foundation in place, it is assumed that you have self-declared, self-certified, safe to fly, secure to fly. You just look at an airspace map. It's like a map, much similar to Google Maps with some shapes and colors. If you are in a green zone, which is going to be, it's expected that 60 to 70% of the entire country will be green zone. You don't need to ask anyone. You can literally just go out and fly your drone. Whether you are flying for recreational purpose or commercial purpose, your drone needs to be registered, your pilot needs to be registered, just like the car model, and you just need to fly. In some cases where drones will be flying near the airports, the airspace is called as a yellow zone. So there you need to ask permission from the air traffic controllers. All of this will be enabled through an online platform. And in some more small cases where you're flying in a defense establishment or you're flying, inside the airport premise, which security also is a concern there, you need to ask for permission from the same platform, but the approval will be given by the central government. So it's literally a one-page sort of summary of the regulation when I presented in one of the slides, and this is what it has come to. And yeah, I mean a 180-degree shift, and trust-based regulation, trust-based ecosystem is what the new policy talks about. So that's it from my side.
No, brilliant. I think that one pager is actually just gotten into 2 minutes of what, or 3 minutes of what you said, Smith. I think it's been fantastic. Ankit, you wanted to add something? Sorry, you were while Smith was saying.
I just second what Smith is saying. You need a street legal car. You need a driving. You need a license plate. You need a driving license, and you're good to fly. In some cases, like you have for mopeds, you don't even need a driving license, right? So I think the rules are as simple as that, well summarized by Smith.
Brilliant. How does it change the education sector, Payal? With this policy, I know it's a massive shift, but how do you look at it from an education?
Policy, well, not so much. But when we talk about introducing, robotics, drones into early stage education, I would say that it's very imperative and it's rather advantageous to introduce drones in the K-12 sector colleges and not limiting it to the likes of private co-curricular edtech or waiting till they get into an IIT. And the students are learning, students at early stage, I think, must be introduced to this technology, not just for understanding, but also for creation, innovation of working prototypes. We've all seen the areas of urban development, transport, agriculture, where working prototypes have been actively made by these students. And I'm not talking about just the rural sector, but also what we've seen in the hackathons is that there are 7 and 8-year-olds which are making brilliant robotics projects, and I think to upgrade that into a drone is just a matter of a few weeks of education. I read about how, as a pilot project, the government of Maharashtra has deployed 2 drones to monitor weekend rush traffic accidents on the mobile motorway. And while we are all harping about reskilling, emerging tech for half a decade, I think the plunge of introducing these technologies, looping them with industrial academia, collaboration in early education is a great way to bridging education to employment gap. I mean, when I saw, Ankit Smith talking about policies, I'm thinking that when is it going to be that the gap between what school child is learning till they go to an IIT, then have a higher education and join their team? That's still a long way away, and everyone's then going to talk about the employment gap. So I think why are we just waiting? What are we waiting around for to increase this? It took 35 years to change our education policy. I think it's about time that we get into schools because children are like Smith said that no cost hardware can be used to create a drone. So why we create that digital infrastructure?
No, I think wonderful, Payal. I think this is a boost to an education sector as well, and we are not waiting for things to happen. But is this also a boost to the services part? Kind of your views around it, and what does it take you from a services point of view?
Absolutely, this is not the boost. This is a overall a kind of fuel to the industry, which we are waiting from long time. And even Smith and Ankit will agree on this, that now we got a ease to work upon. Now we got a our mind to think just beyond the policies, right? There was a time when we only think about the policies, permissions, and we are only talking with the client, sir, can we get the permission? Will you take the permission, or do we need to take the permission? So we are only discussing scope in 20 to 30% of the time, and more we are focused on permission side, because locally there was a lot of other problems which local authorities or police can create, and it can also end up into a lockup, right? Pilots and people on ground can end up to that situation. It happened with us a lot of time, but we are able to come out with the local level of management and permission from the police. But this is not the way to scale up the business, right? It's absolutely the thing which is there, the single page of policy. It's very much required, and specifically to scale up the service part, because it will scale up into a mass level. Like, I will give you a latest example. NHAI came with the monthly videography using a drone of all their asset, whatever, either it be a greenfield stage, planning stage of any highway, or in the construction stage, we can say it EPC, or in the the operation stage of a highway. So they want videography, they want data every month to do the audits, to check whatever happening on ground. Is it matching with the the Excel sheet shared by the consultants? So they are doing this, and the scope is more than 20,000 kilometers. Right now, I can tell you, every drone company, somehow they are putting their effort to to deliver that particular NHAI project. Everyone is, I think, occupied with that project. A local guy who used to be a basic photographer or a cinematographer. Now he also became a a aerial videographer for NHI projects. So things are getting evolved, and people are actually earning a wealth from this.
I think fantastic, and I think we were discussing backstage as well that drones are also a subpart of the entire sector of technology, which we call as robotics. Ankit or Smith, your viewpoint, how does it change the equation, right? So I know there's a policy for drones. I know people have been doing a lot of robotics classes back in high school, etc. What is something that you see going forward, let's say in the next 5 or 10 years, in both the regions and not just drones, right? I think I think robotics is as much connected to drones as drones are, even though we have now a policy. Any viewpoint on what you are seeing in the future or what you are envisioning in the future? Anyone? I think your takeaway, but
So if we look at drones, because drones have to take off and they have to operate in the airspace, it's a fairly controlled real estate in that sense, and therefore it is not straightforward for the government to allow drone operations, and this opening up is a huge leap of faith that the government has taken on the entire industry. Having said that, if the rest of the robotics industry does not have any regulations, it's actually great. First of all, not having regulations is better, like Smith was saying backstage, than having regulations, because not having means you can do whatever the hell you want for the time being. And therefore, one should make the most of it by doing things in the right way so that it remains that way, and not do it the wrong way so that people get spooked and they try to bring it under control and regulation. So I think that level of self-discipline has to be imposed. Having said that, I think autonomy, if you look at the rest of the world, has gone berserk, right? I mean, the cost of labor, if you look at the West, is so high that they are looking at autonomy in each and every aspect of operations that they can imagine. And if our kids in our country also learns robotics at a very fast pace, which Payal is helping us in a really big way, and we also sort of tune ourselves to some of those sensibilities, then there are large markets to be unlocked in the rest of the world, because there is a huge dearth of manpower. The cost of manpower is very, very high in the rest of the world, and therefore that is one area that we need to get more exposure to as well, in my opinion. We in India are so used to having access to manpower that we do not think of robotics the same way that the world's largest market thinks of it. So I would say that a lot of exposure also is required for us to know and sensitize more and more towards autonomy. We may laugh towards the dishwashers, but we know what happened in the pandemic, and people have bought dishwashers in an unprecedented scale. We would laugh about people who had maybe floor robots, but look at the amount of floor robots that have been invested in during the pandemic. So I think we have realized the power of self-work and the challenges with working ourselves, and therefore adoption of technology is the only next thing. We are, due to the pandemic, we are very sensitive to that now. Finally, it is no longer a Western world's luxury of having technology embedded in the parts of our life. And I think more and more people should come up and solve some of these problems where the large markets exist. Once we solve it for the large markets, and we provide that education to any and everybody anywhere in the country to be able to solve for those large markets, I think we will be building the right economic engine, which will then come back to serve us in our less than large markets, probably in some areas, but still having significantly greater volume, because what we build there is going to help us bring ability to reduce costs of what we are building over here for our markets and our needs. Our markets, which are the big voluminous markets, cannot afford the cost of technology that exists today. So we have to find the right way of going about it, go and solve it for the people who have the maximum ability to pay, automate the hell out of that, and that reduced costs, faster pace of adoption will bring the technology back to us at doubly faster pace than us struggling with only building it for our own purposes over here. and focusing on low cost. So India, like Smith said, needs to focus on not low cost but high IP. And high IP is what's going to get us to the next level of revolution, and not low cost, because low cost just means that you're competing with China on cost arbitrage. I mean, that's never a winning battle in the short term.
No, very well said. I think anyone else is, before I come in, Smith, Payal.
So I'll just add to this. I mean, drones, and again, I'll just while the question is about robotics, I'll just say what role will drones enable for any other robotics innovation that I'm trying to do, and then probably deploy the solution to the market. Probably drones are much more simpler to deploy because when we look at a robotics solution, when I build a robot, I want to build a business around it, commercialize it, and then go to the market. Whereas I want to do it with drones, I will be able to build my first or second or third drone, and will be able to go out and deploy it for some services, or will be able to sell it. A much easier go-to market when we look at hardware as an innovation. Whereas when we talk about robotics solutions, yes, robots can be built much simpler than drones, but when you have to take it to the commercial market, it is a very different sort of solution. So what you build as projects in robotics versus how you take it toward the commercial market has a big sort of gap in them, and requires significant investment, innovation, a go-to-market strategy and all of that. Whereas when you talk about drones, yes, the first drone will be very small, hobby grade and all, but after that you can quickly scale up to building an agriculture spraying drone where some parts of the airframe probably would be manufactured here, motors and propellers could come from China. But after that, I will be able to take that drone and earn money out of that. So that go-to-market is very quick in drones, and this will enable a lot of people to earn money, build businesses around hardware, and our understanding and skill set of tinkering, building hardware solutions and innovating will quickly increase. Also, this will lead to us creating a very famous example that I keep giving everyone. I have also copied it from somewhere, which is you build an iPhone. It's designed in California, so $1,200 first go to California, and then the $300 or the $400 go to China, which is just contract manufacturing, right? So when we start building hardware solutions, we will be creating IP, and once we start creating IP and monetizing this IP is very easy. We will be behind the $1,200 that the iPhone gets, not the $300 or the $400 that the contractor gets, right? So we don't need to compete at the $300 or the $400 level if we can at the $1,200 sort of price point. That's what I want to
No, well said. So we were discussing off stage, right? So I started my robotics with 8088 processors. We are from a band of, let's say, a group of people who've actually done almost their entire education in English. We understand this. My question to Payal and Kanav is, if we want to build this country in terms of the IP hub, or if we call it as the next R&D hub, so as to say, or the IP hub of the world, language seems to be an important barrier in terms of what we can take this to the grassroots of India. How are you trying to solve this in terms of this niche technology like drones and robotics?
Okay, I'll go first. Well, and like you said, taking reference to what we sort of discussed backstage earlier on, is that a lot of these, so-called edtech companies, when they talk about co-curricular learning, what they've done is they've literally hardwired into a pretty-looking robot a huge patch of Scratch or a patch of Python, given it to the children, going, okay, these are the 5 projects you can make, and that's about it. No one's talking about open source. When we introduced open source to our children, and we're talking about students from marginalized communities do not have electricity. They don't have laptops. They don't have computers. Wi-Fi is unheard of, and they come from predominantly single device homes. And if we could teach open source Scratch and Python to them, and Arduino to calibrate a robot, moving on to a Raspberry Pi, I think languages is not the struggle here. But the struggle was that everyone was trying to find an easy way out, limiting them only to things like, how to make a Alexa. Well, I'm sure that 80% of children do not know what Alexa is, or how to make a you clap your hands and the switch is going to come off. So when this was told to our children, they were like, what switch are you talking about? And therefore we had to sensitize everything to, how do you sow seeds in the patch of land that your father has in the village? How do you monitor weather? So those are the things that we introduced, and they were possible via an open source language. It wasn't difficult. Then there was a bot which was put together at the cheapest, lowest cost, which worked on this open source. And we've seen great examples where we had to show videos to our children of Hoovers, that were made by, okay, not taking names here, but let's say Dyson Hoovers that were shown to the children. Boston Dynamics speaking bot that was in Singapore Park saying, stay safe, maintain social distancing, wear your mask. And an 8-year-old an 8-year-old girl was the first one to adapt that. It was all about programming a bot on the open source, and she actually made it in 3 languages. It was Hindi, Marathi, and English. But stay home, stay safe, because she was actually not allowed to leave that little chawl area where she lived in, and she wanted the bot to go up and down and convey that message. So that's the power of introducing children to open source, giving them ideas in the form of, and this is all done digitally because the schools are still shut, showing them a few videos, and they've created sort of marvelous projects, not only from a pandemic perspective, but we had a student who created a robotic cooker after we showed him a multi-function, air dryer, and the jokes about the banana bread. And he did create a bot that cooked rice via solar steam. So yes, that's the power of language and coding. And Nikhil, you're going to tell us more about the coding language you have created, where children can code in their. It doesn't have to be English. It could be any other.
No, I think I remember a joke. I think you rightly mentioned, with no disrespect to Miss or Mr. Alexa. I think 1645 dialects and 27 mother tongues. I think Alexa is going to have a very, very hard time trying to cover up what's going on in the Indian subcontinent. But before I speak a little bit of what we've done, I think kind of your thoughts.
Yeah. So my thoughts are, very specifically from the service side, from the drone industry, right? So we got our jobs pan-India. So we have, South India to cater, West, Seven Sister States, and, towards the northern side. Every state, every 100 kilometer, you have a bit change in the language, right? And when I'm talking about the language part, the fundamental and the very first guy who get, who is actually the front leader of any project is the drone pilot, right? Most of the drone pilots are maybe local guy, because you can't have a fleet of 100 pilots or 100 drone headquartered in Delhi, Bombay, or Bangalore, right? You can't scale up your business that way. That's a very difficult way. That will make you a asset heavy company, right? I don't think an investor will would like to go ahead with a asset heavy company, specifically in services sector, right? So this is a challenge for us, where I see an opportunity that we require a standardization. Specifically in training, there are some people who are just 12th standard or maybe ITI or Polytechnic, and that too specifically in their local language. But there is a standardization which is required from the training companies or the training organization who is coming, who are actually playing their role to give the certification or to give the skill-based training to all these pilots. So there need to be a standardization of all the technology, all the lessons given to them, and then we have to come on a same platform, that how we convey our messages, how they understand, are they able to understand our technical jargons or not, are they getting that or not. But because making them very comfortable with the English, that's not my job. My job is to get my work done in a very professional and the required manner, and my thing has to be done on time, right? That is my perspective. But there is a huge requirement, there is a huge opportunity from the standardization side, and I think standardization will actually cater to this particular problem of the language barriers we have in India. We are facing that problem on everyday basis. That's not a very new thing for us. We are facing.
No, I think if this is not new India, then what is? I think all of these leaders on this particular show are so ground rooted. They know the problem, and they are also giving that challenging, that viewpoint across as to how do we solve this challenge at a very, very ground level. I think Payal reference to something that I have created. I think it's called Bhamal, or it's called Bharat Markup Language. But there's a story behind it. The story was, I am also a mentor for Atal Incubation Center, and last year we kept a kind of a student innovation program where students need to create something for society. And the students who won this were from a very, very remote area in Chhattisgarh. And they made something, and this is called scientific serendipity or scientific thought. They accidentally dropped hara saag, lal saag, and bajra on a piece of land. And, the leaves that came out, they took juice of it. And the kids in that sector suffered from malnutrition. 90% of those kids actually had that malnutrition solved by taking that juice. Now, these kids came to us to ask us what should we do next. And we had a very simple, nonchalant response of saying, why don't you create this juice into a dried kind of a powder form, which is easier to sell. One of that kid actually asked me, and he said, sir, agar mujhe Angrezi aati hoti, so I could have taken this to the world. And I realized at that point that language is too much of a barrier for India to succeed. So this language was created just for kids to actually code in their 27 mother tongues, as we call it in India, just to get across. I think my next question to you guys, I think this has been wonderful getting your thoughts across. COVID in general has also caused a lot of, if I may say, mental tribulations. There's a lot of psychological impact as well. Are you seeing anything in the field that you are, where robotics and drones are trying to solve this within the country? Any thoughts on that?
I don't know about robotics, but there's one startup that I know in IIT Bombay that built a headset that would measure brain activity to try and simulate away some of these negative thoughts and something like that. So I'm not too sure. I was on a jury with IIT Bombay and I saw their innovation. It's pretty interesting, but and then I know of a toy company called Miko, which is an Indian startup, another IIT Bombay startup, which has built a small robot which can interact with kids. And if you have a single child, or it has a bunch of things that it does to continue to engage with the kids. But these are the two examples that come to my mind right off the bat.
So in one of our hackathons, we had two of the winning solutions, wherein one was to do with AI-enabled mental health app. The other was AI patch and robotics to create a digital hospital. So when we did a mobilization of them after the whole incubation phase, and I said that okay, let's sort of circulate it to our children, extend it to the parents, and find out what just happened. And we came out with some phenomenal study, good, bad, ugly, all of that. But what came out of it was that that AI tools actually reduce patients' fear of being judged. And in this case, I'm saying patients because it was a bunch of parents, kids, professionals, all of them. Fear of being judged, they may be particularly useful in helping people deal with medication dependence and substance abuse disorder, which need help, and that happened with a lot of our teenage children. And while this happened, one of the developers of the mental health app, Asha, is an IITian, and they introduced us to this white paper that said that as many as 23% of people may have not been completely true to their doctors in the past about something commonly stigmatized behaviors like drinking, smoking, or sexual activity. And it is very easier for people to then admit the true extent of their dependence to a robot than a human that they will assume will judge them or may talk about it as a reference to context someone else. And many potential mental health patients who did actually use that app not just as a tester, but because they wanted to, are concerned about their confidentiality. So it may take time for them to build the trust necessary to be fully honest with a human therapist. And when we talk about teenagers and children, parents often complain that the children don't talk to us. What are the chances that they're going to talk to a therapist or even a friend about an inferiority complex, something that they're facing? So we found that to be quite sort of beneficial.
I think very, very interesting examples. Very interesting examples. I think from robotics to drones, from concepts to execution, I think the audiences would have gotten a view from this panel. And I think these are the forerunners and the forebearers of what this country really needs. And this is India in the future. And this is the new normal for drones and robotics. So over to you, Sneha, if there are any questions from the audiences we can answer.
Yes, Mr. Malhotra, that's exactly what I was getting to. There are some questions. If you see on the right-hand side from the audience, would you like to take up the questions now?
I'm okay. I think the first question comes from Prasad. He says, I got one curious question regarding robots. Can we develop consciousness or chetna in any robot or machine as being a computer engineer? Any one of you want to take that?
Didn't we see a news item regarding somebody who's built a humanoid robot in India very recently? So I think but honestly, let's be very fair to where AI is today. AI is nowhere close to general intelligence. AI is at very best very good at solving very specific problems, and therefore general consciousness is not something which anybody is expecting to come out of AI or intelligence domain anytime soon. But yes, for solving very specific problems, there may not be any any other solution that is better.
Yeah, and I may want to add over this, since this is my area of research. The idea is that there are certain portions of human intelligence that are being picked up and pushed into AI. Like Ankit said, it's not AI is a misnomeric term; it's more machine learning. But I think certain portions of human intelligence are being picked into AI. For example, vision. A large part of what vision does in AI or in machine learning has come up because we have looked at the V1 or the visual motor cortex, which is actually sitting at the back of the brain. And it's not completely analyzed based on that, but a part of it is being done. And there is now a research in MIT, which I was reading, that they have actually done a kind of V1 simulation of the same thing that happens in our visual cortex, just in front of an AI, and it actually is more it is less susceptible to attacks by generative adversarial networks. And that has happened because we have actually taken a leaf out of what we are doing in human vision in order to do that, right? So I think there is work being done, there is research being done, but consciousness, I don't think we should combine the two cases, right? So we call AI the IQ and we call humans the EQ. So I think the EQ and the IQ needs to meet together. I think that's the entire value of melding that we do. All right, coming on to the next question. How about making India the electronics hub of the world? How can we do that? I think it's a very generic question, but anyway.
I think as an electronics hub, it is, So basically we do a lot of contract electronics manufacturing in India. We yet don't have a fab that is probably the most essential building block. So I think once we have fabs, we can actually march progressively in that direction. When I mean a fab, basically the silicon fab that makes the microprocessors and the microcontrollers. So I think that's the missing link. Otherwise, we do a lot of electronics assembly in India.
Brilliant.
Kyle, sorry.
Kyle, you wanted to add something?
No, I think he pretty much answered that. So thank you.
Perfect. So I think the same person, Aman, has asked another question. Can we have big drone companies like DJI from India?
Ankit, do you want me to go on this?
Yes, please, absolutely.
I mean, the question actually is, has a small issue which I would want to point out, which is DJI when it started was not a big company. So it really depends on how you start, what kind of support you get, both from the government as well as the market, and obviously the technology itself. So Will we have a big company like DJI in India? There is only one DJI across the world, and it will remain DJI. But we have the Idea Force, New Space Research, Asteria Aerospace, Adani Aerospace, Adani Defense, and Tata Advanced Systems of the world, who actually, in fact, have beaten a lot of Israeli companies and a lot of Chinese companies to serve to the Indian Defense Forces. So, will we have a DJI? We don't need a DJI. We need an Indian company with an Indian brand, which will build applications. Drones for various applications, which DJI is also doing. By the way, except for the recreational photography drones, Indian companies give a run, to DJI when it comes to agriculture spraying drone, when it comes to affordability, or to the specific survey drones when it comes to PPK grade survey, at least in the endurance side or the VTOL hybrid side. So that's not what DJI is making, right? They've built a perfect product for the recreational market, and it's a recreational product, consumer electronics that they're targeting. Which our ecosystem has opened up. Probably some 2-3 people will come in and say, why don't we have a recreational drone in India? And it's pretty. Someone has to just put some money, have some focus, and it's not a difficult sort of technology, except for some thin margin of optimization that they've achieved because they've been in the market for about 10 years now. So yeah, that's how.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add on an augment onto it, saying that it's an Indian problem. You need to have an Indian solution, and I think the viewpoint from every one of us as a panelist is, can we change that perspective within India and say that this is my problem and I need to solve? I have a very interesting question on agriculture for all of you. This is being asked by Kanchan.
Nikhil,
I know we're running out of time, but I'll just ask this last question, Sneha. Agriculture seems to be a major area where drones are used case. How can we make it affordable for farmers? Maybe this is the last question that we can ask.
So tractors are equipments that are required for farmers, and tractors have been made affordable. First, yes, the technology has been optimized and there's economies of scale, but also various NBFCs and various government initiatives have stepped in where they have said they will finance tractors, and they will make it affordable, they'll make it shareable and all of that. In the agriculture, there are two types of applications for everyone, our listeners. We have agriculture surveying and then agriculture spraying. So agriculture survey will very soon, just by the sheer number of drones that are being used, will become affordable. It's not really, it's also required, less frequently. And agriculture spraying, yes, the NBFCs or the banks or the various government institutes will step in and will treat agriculture spraying drone just like a tractor or various other equipments that are available at shared facilities. Is how it starts being affordable for farmers. That's.
Thank you.
Yeah, over to you, Sneha. I know we have run out of time, but please do the honor.
All right. Thank you so much. Can I just say thank you to all the panelists and our speakers. This has been so enlightening, especially to me and everybody, I'm sure the audience as well. Thank you so much for all the key points that you've given us. Thank you once again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.